I'm Laura Millen, director of the museum, and I'm honored to be here. I've just come, both John and I, have just come from our statewide conference that's called MAGDA, the Montana Art Gallery Directors Association. We have an annual conference at Chico Hot Springs, and it's a block booking conference where we bring exhibits to the table and we share them with art centers and museums around the state. There's 51 members of this organization that has been going since 1972. Joanne was there at the beginning. This exhibit, which Susan organized, toured the state already through the MAGDA organization, and this is its last venue here. So I was able to share with everybody that we were having an opening tonight, and Joanne was going to be here, and Susan was going to be here, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful occasion. The exhibit was organized by Susan Barnett, Scarlett, Curator of Western American Art at the Whitney Western Art Museum in Cody. Susan, before she got this fabulous position in Cody, worked in many institutions in Montana, most recently the Yellowstone Art Center as a curator. And so we're old friends. And I'm so happy she could be here today. And old-time friends here too, these two. And Daley, who was born in Wisconsin and moved to Anaconda in 1969 to teach at the local Catholic high school, is a member of the Dominican Sisterhood of Sinsinawa. Tell me again. Sinsinawa. She founded and directed Anaconda's Copper Village Museum of Art, which is a member of the MAGDA group. And there, at that time, worked in the early days, worked for the Montana Arts Council, reaching out to small communities to identify, connect, and celebrate their cultural assets and spread the word about this coming arts center, Arts Council. Her travels resulted in several of the prints that you see on view here, with the perspective of the driver's seat, complete with steering wheel and rear view mirror. And she returned to Anaconda in 1985 after 7 years studying art in Italy. So throughout her career as an artist and as a Dominican sister, engaging in communities has been central to her creative practice. She also documented the changing landscape of Anaconda following the demise of the mining industry, which you see back there, and believes that, quote, the ordinary things of life deserve to be seen, and considers as a part of her mission as an artist to see and represent things that are so commonplace as to go unnoticed. The exhibit, as I just said, has traveled through MAGDA to Anaconda, to Butte, to Helena, and now to Missoula. I want to just comment too that her Joanne was engaged with the Arts Council thanks to David Nelson, her close friend, and who we lost a couple years ago now? No, just a year ago. In November. He was the longtime director, kind of the founding and longtime director of the Montana Arts Council. Also was the director of the Yellowstone Art Museum for a spell, and many other things. Was one of the founders of WestStaff, the Western Arts Federation, and Montana PBS, and pretty impressive career, very devoted to fostering art and culture in Montana. We are going to conduct a memorial for David here tomorrow, and Joanne will be one of the speakers. We have a great roster of speakers from all the longtime chairs of the Montana Arts Council, our Congressman Pat Williams, and others who knew David well and will talk about his work and how integral to the history of Montana and Montana culture. He was. So this is kind of in honor of David Nelson too, isn't it? So we've invited these two to just kind of chat so without further ado.
I just want to follow on what you were just saying about David Nelson, to credit him for making this show possible.
Yes.
A very gracious grant from David Nelson, gift from David Nelson, allowed the framing of this show.
That's right. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And so he knew about this project before he died and was super, super excited about it. So I'm so glad for that.
Well, I'll just start with a really brief, how did Joann and I meet, and how did we start working together? I've known Joann, I think, for 45 years. My first professional job was director of the Copper Village Museum and Art Center in Anaconda, which Joann had founded. And she came back from Italy at the time when I was there. And so we got to meet, I got to see her work, got to see just what a great community builder she is. I really admire that about you, because I'm more the kind of person who will just kind of do things on my own and hit my head against walls. And you just have this way of connecting with people and making people want to work with you. And it's a wonderful gift. And I think that that's been such a thread in your work. It was an amazing thing that you did, starting an art center in Anaconda in, what year was that, 73?
During the strike, nobody had a job.
Yeah.
Everybody was out of work.
Yeah. And it was a time when copper prices were down, the whole continuance of this the company of a one company town was really precarious at that moment.
And at that moment, Anaconda relinquished all of their holdings in Chile. Were they in Chile? No. I think so.
Yeah.
And brought their company back to Anaconda that never was meant to make any money. It had a history of whatever. So they had to look for Anaconda to be the profit-making, not
Instead
Chile.
of Chile.
And that was a turmoil time, and also upheaval of the urban renewal and tearing up and everything being torn down. And you turn on the radio and people would be yelling at each other. And the Catholic Church had 3 different parishes, and they could never support 3 anymore, so there was a combining, and so there was general upheaval of everything that was in one way is now changing. And this was started in the midst of all of that. And it was a response to it was a miracle. After it started, it was known as the Montana Miracle. This should not have happened. An abandoned church, a Salvation Army church near the courthouse in Anaconda, had been vacant for many years. And a banker in town called me and said, I think they would be willing to give it to you, because he knew that we were interested in finding something. I was teaching at Anaconda Central, and through the students, we traveled the state, we went to Bozeman, we would try to visit galleries, and they said, is there a way that we can have something like that here? And then they were helping me with adult education, and they were also saying the same thing. So we kind of let people know we were looking, and that was the start of something that when I started traveling through the state, I said, I don't wish you to have 3 major problems: a strike, no money, no people to do things, whatever kind of things. But it is a teaching thing in the sense that when people are willing, if they have a dream and have an idea that is important to people, if they hang on to that dream, there will be other people that also want to be part of that. And it doesn't take a cast of thousands or $1 million. It just takes a couple people with dreams.
And you so much did that at Copper Village, and then later when you traveled around the state. But let's stay in Anaconda for a little bit.
Okay.
I also think that it's amazing that you got permission to go into the factory, to go into the smelter. Because that was a really dangerous and filthy place, and you wouldn't think that, for one thing, they would want to expose that, or to expose themselves to that liability. How did you get into the smelter to do drawings?
Well, I actually didn't. I wanted to go. I had started my studio in Anaconda, and I needed nitric acid for my plates. They were my supplier of my acid. I would just drive up to the box and say, I need some acid today. And they would say, come right in. And I said, as long as I'm here, could I do some drawing of things? So I got close. And then I thought, I'd like changing of shift. Could I stay around? Because someone said, there are going to be a lot of men out here pretty soon. It's the changing of shift time. And I thought, oh, that would be exciting. Can I stay and I'll draw? Well, it was mobbed. There was no way I could do it. But I have a couple of prints that are the changing of the shift. Yeah. And then the one of the men that is putting the tree into the copper cauldron, he was lived across the street from me on 3rd Street in Anaconda. And he would come over when I was making that print. And his job was always in darkness and fire, and it was always inside. And he couldn't see how that was worthy to be made into art. He was puzzled by that. He said, you know, it's awful, it's hot, but for me to look at that and not see it as something that wasn't worthy to be made. And I said, would you like to be part of it when I'm making it? And he said, yes. So he didn't have too much spare time, but he would come over and watch how it was made. So that, when we first had the first show of the Anaconda series at Northern Illinois in DeKalb, where that was my master's thesis show. And then this second showing was in Anaconda. And he was a star of the show for that too, when we showed it.
Yeah. Another one I'd like to point out is the Anaconda print that's here behind us. It's such a kind of a montage of the town. You're kind of up where the smelter is, aren't you? Looking down? No, you're not.
Well, I'm looking toward the courthouse.
Okay.
On the top of the hill near the art center. Would be to the left of it.
And you've kind of, this is before you started doing collage, but it's like collage, isn't it? You've taken elements from other drawings and prints.
Everything is heavily outlined. And you could cut out. And actually, that's how the collages are. They're cut out from one print and put to another.
Yeah. So you have the smelter, you have the smelterman, the picnic bus, Mona's Monday wash, and I think about that too. There she is putting out her wash in that dirty air.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the grittiness of Anaconda, and yet it's kind of colorful. It has copper colors to it. That one's so iconic of Anaconda.
It is, and it has been used. I have a book, I think. Did I bring it? That has a picture of it. No, I didn't.
Well, that's
I didn't bring that one.
We can look at it there.
But the interesting thing about this one, I was very young then, and I would run at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the man standing by the lamppost waiting for the bus it used to be a trolley on 3rd Street, used to take the men to work. But it was the bus now, and I turned it into a school bus, but it says Anaconda. And anything you write has to be backwards on the plate, so everything comes out in reverse. And he's standing on a slab of copper. And so that was a very difficult print to make, and I made it in DeKalb, and they weren't in a big print department then. Now they have a whole slew of rooms. And when I was printing this, the rest of the class would say, when are you going to print that? And then they would kind of leave because I took up so much space.
Oh, that's right. 'Cause this is
3 plates.
this is a real color etching. Usually you just do black and white and then
Yeah.
hand color
Yeah.
with watercolor.
Yes.
Because
Yeah,
you're really not
they're
that
not.
much into the technical part of
No,
printmaking
no.
generally.
But the print, I would just put a thin, there's a couple of them, the background I rolled out, like the blue sky, a little bit of
Uh-huh.
thin ink.
Sure.
But most other times would be using pencil or something.
But here
this-
you're actually doing
It's a
viscosity
very,
printing,
yes,
right?
it's when you get oil for your car, you look for the viscosity, they look, what is the viscosity? And it's, all the colors are printed at one time. Most of the time in printmaking, you have a different print for each color, a plate. And then if you look at the comic pages, the edges, sometimes they're out of sync, and you can see the colors. So you have to have a way of registering, and so you have a mark on your press where you put the plate and where you put the paper, so they will register. And this one, I had first put on a thin coat of dark purple ink, and that was the intaglio, the deeply etched thing, the line work, and that's done in purple. And then the next layer was orange, and that had less viscosity than the lower one. And some areas, like the white towel and the windows, I took Q-tips and wiped them out after printing. And everything that had texture at that height would grab some of the ink. And some would grab all of the inks, and others were smooth and clean, and it's very complicated. And then after I had the purple, the orange, and the yellow, it wasn't enough, it didn't do. And I couldn't do any more on that one plate. So I measured it and got one big plate and just etched, blocked out with tar, everything else except where I wanted the sky, or the green, where I wanted the green, and left those spots available for etching. And the trays were big, and this is why I had to do them in my place. I mean, I did it in a school setting. And so then the acid would etch the plate, and I would roll the first colors, and then I would roll the plate through the press and keep the paper attached under the rollers, flip up the felts, and then I did have to have another person help me, because you had to do this fast before the paper began to shrink, because you had dampened paper. And so you've got the first colors of the print showing on top, and then you place in your second plate, match it up to the sizing, and then run it through, and then you've got the finished plate. And that's exciting. And I learned you don't do it late at night with nobody to help you. And I tried that one night. And got to the green plate and put it in upside down. So all those hours of work for nothing.
And I've noticed that they're all a little different. It's
That's
not,
right,
it is
no,
nothing like a
no.
reproduction where everything gets
No.
turned out the same. There's lots of variation. Another one where I think that the printmaking story is interesting is this view of Anaconda. And I think that's one where you said you did forget to mirror. And so people in Anaconda would say, where exactly are you? That doesn't make
The
sense.
cemetery is on the other end of town. What-
Right? Yeah. But
And the mistake I made was I lugged this whole big plate. I had the tar on it. And I drew directly what I saw on the plate.
the
that
tar
was my
resists
mistake.
the acid, so you
That's
put
right.
the tar on
Yeah, tar,
first and then draw through it.
And then where I removed the tar, I didn't dig into the plate, but you just take off the tar and then put it in the acid, and the acid will do that. And I wanted to get more dark spots in there too, so I used contact paper. The tailings, do you see the dark areas? They have kind of a ridge around them. I cut out the contact paper, and left everything all cut. And I left it in the acid too long, and it chewed the plate. It just, and all I could do is, that plate is ruined. It looked terrible. And the hillsides, everything had hard surfaces around them, and so I hid it for a long time, and then I thought, I can't afford not to use it. And so I finished it. And I took a metal tool and scraped and scraped and scraped, and that was another thing. Students, they said, they had to leave. There's nothing worse than metal with a knife. It's so noisy. But you learn to be challenged and try to figure out the challenges along the way.
Then when you came back to Anaconda after your time in Italy, actually during the time you were in Italy, you really started working on collage more. And you did some print series, but you started, I don't know, for one thing, I think something that happens to printmakers is you end up with drawers that are stacked full of prints, and you can only sell and give away so many, and there they are. So you started cutting them up and making some, like the one behind us here, that's kind of a composite of Anaconda. Well,
And
it's
in Italy.
yeah. What's the name of that one? It's
Bentornato.
Bentornato, Joeann. So this is when you return to Anaconda. It's a celebration of your coming back.
And I combined Italy with Anaconda.
And then this one where you're combining the idea of the sleeping giant and Marcus Daly and Anaconda and the coin, and it's so funny.
It is funny.
Yeah.
And the titles are telling you that this is another time in Anaconda. And is the film strip here where you have?
Yeah, right here. Uh-huh.
That one I almost got stoned to death. When I did that, I had someone drive me, and on the Deer Lodge, going to Deer Lodge Road, where you get that view of the stack rolling as you come into town. And I've always been aware, first you have just the top, and you get more. So I said, will you drive me and stop every few minutes so I can, get the next stage? And so when I put that in the show, it didn't have any smoke.
Oh.
And I thought people would just love that print. And I asked a good friend one day, I said, I thought people would be interested in that. Nobody likes it. I said, why? There's no smoke. And I said, but there's no smoke. But that's the reality.
Yeah.
Like the giant is sleeping now. But,
Yeah. I remember the really popular print being the bars and the churches, and then you did the houses later, which wasn't quite as, but Anaconda had so many bars and churches, probably one to one, the ratio.
and one time, I lived on 3rd Street when there was the trolley going up. there were 23 bars on that one street. And supposedly, I don't know if this is just folklore or the truth, that there were maybe 3 cars of men, on the trolley. And you could stop, the first stop, you could hop off at one bar, have a beer, and then hop on the next, and make quite a few bars on your way home. That's the story that is told on 3rd Street.
But it really captures the skyline of Anaconda and some of its memorable.
And after
places.
I did the churches, and someone told me, now you've got to do the real church in town. And I said, what are you talking about? The churches. I mean, now you have to do the bars. You did the church. I did the churches first. Now you do the real church in town. And that was a little harder to do because the churches, had the steeples to break up the space. And so the bars were mostly flat, at least in my neighborhood, they were pretty flat. But so then the signs became important. I made the signs huge. So that broke up the space.
So after you left the Copper Village, you worked for the Montana Arts Council for quite a while, and you put on a lot of miles. And the series Montana Miles came out of that, which you, as I recall, you were going to communities of 2,500 or less people.
3,000 or under.
3,000 or
One
under.
was like 54, I remember.
Oh,
people.
One big one.
A big one.
And you really connected people. You convened conversations, and you just asked people what they wanted from a cultural organization, or what culture they had, and what they wanted to do, and then you connected people together, as I recall you saying it.
Yes, it was when I was asked when the Catholic schools closed, and Dave called and said, we're sorry about the Catholic schools closing, but we'd like you to work for us now. And I said, but I have a job, I'm directing the Art Center. They said, oh, you used to teach and direct the Art Center, you're used to going to doing 2 things at once. And you could do half-time and half-time, that would be okay. And that's what I did. And I said, well, what'll I do? And he said, we don't know. we just want you here. And most of Montana is made up of small towns, and we really don't know who lives there and what they're thinking about. And if the arts are part of it, how can we be of help? We'd like you to figure that out. And so this was the figuring out. And my theory was, you can't just walk into a town and say, here I am, I want you to tell me about things. I had to somehow become part of the community before I had a right to ask them questions. And because the Arts Council subscribed to, had me the art clippings I would get, and I'd go through and I'd find a name of a person who was interested and seemed to be and make a contact. And then I would say, I just want to get to know the town, but there has to be one time when we can have a meeting in the evening, not a new meeting. Find a group that's already meeting and ask if we could be a guest, and then you invite people to an already existing meeting. I knew enough about small towns to realize that to make a town work, you have to, everybody is already involved up to their ears. So that has to be settled before we can start. And then I arrive, stay with somebody, because nobody has motels. And the whole point, I thought, I had to be part of the community, which meant I had to live there. And most of these places didn't have motels or anything, if you wanted to stay someplace else. But it was the right thing, because you were seeing the community through the community, rather than you, outsider, coming in. And then I'd say, and somebody would say, we have a person who's really interested in oil painting. She's had a few classes. Would you like to see her work? Sure, that would be nice. Or one other thing I said, I am an artist. I also, if you would like to have talks or, Rotary Club, a garden club, whoever, I'd be happy to give a talk about education or what's happening in the arts in Montana. And all these towns were happy to have an outsider come in and talk to them. But I would do it after I'd seen something about the town first. And then I called it professional house guest, full-time driver, and town gossip. Because people, one thing that with that meeting at night, I would give an overview of what has happened, my travels through Montana, and then by that time I may have, given a talk at some club, and I had maybe taught, did an assembly in a high school or whatever. It was always better to have me there a day doing something so I could explore. And then I would kind of report what I've been seeing and what I heard about their town. And then they would gather in, there's also a movie I would show called Powers of 10. That chair put out by the person who designed. I can't remember it now. But it was a 2-minute movie. And in those days, we had these great big machines I dragged around and set up. And but it came from outer space. There was a sleeping man at a picnic. You saw it?
I used to use it in my physics class.
Did you?
Yes.
You explain it. It's the most phenomenal movie.
You saw a man on a blanket, laying on a blanket in Chicago near the football stadium. And then they would, in a few seconds, they'd go out 10 times farther away. So you could see more, you could see part of the stadium. Then they'd go up 10 times farther away and you could see maybe a little bit of Lake Michigan. They kept doing this, and I think it was 40 steps. And you see more of Illinois than the United States, and then the northern hemisphere, then the Earth, and so on. And you go out into space. And then they went in the other direction, down into the atom. So it was like 40 powers of 10 between the nucleus of the atom and the size of the universe. That was a fascinating movie. There were Chicago people who put that together.
Yes, and it was in black and white.
Yeah.
And it had a very British the voice was, a very interesting voice. But I kept dragging that around, and I kept thinking, why am I showing this? We didn't talk about it. But my theory was, and Dave's theory too, there was something about that expansive going out. It emptied everybody of everything and saw all possibilities. You never said a word, but you knew you were talking to different people after that. I think it was just, did you think too? Expanding horizons, I think, was the big thing. That we're here, but there's so much more. And so we'd see that. And then they would gather in small little groups. And there were 3 questions. The first one was, what was the last exciting thing you saw or happened in your town? And then people would tell. And then what do you think needs to, what dreams would you have for your town? What do you need here? What would make it a better place to live? And some would say, well, pavement would be nice. And somebody else would, they would share their things. The interest, and then it was, what are some obstacles to making this happen? After the dreaming. what are your obstacles that might be problems? And then, how do you think you would deal with it? And I was always amazed that money was not the issue. People were not concerned about the money aspect. They were concerned about nobody else cares, or nobody, who else? And then one by one, and this is the thing I found when I would visit towns, and I'd be giving a talk and would ask, I was at a Rotary Club, and a man said, the last town I was in, I was part of a theater group, and I just loved it, and nobody's interested here. I don't know how, but that's what I would like, is theater. And after everybody else talked, I said, at the garden club today, Mrs. So-and-so said the same thing. Here's her phone number. Why don't you call her? So that kind of people didn't know what was happening in other parts of the state, and maybe they could do it too. So I was the town crier then, the gossip. And another group said, our girls came back with a first in gymnastics. And wouldn't it be nice to keep this going? But to have dance, and we don't know anybody, we want them to go farther. And I said, Montana has a group called Montana Dance, and here's a phone number. Give her the phone number. And she called, and she came out screaming, they're going to come and visit next week. And so that idea of there are other people, and there are possibilities that you can dream, and there are people in your midst that can help with that dream.
That's great. And I think as you look around the show, you're going to see a lot of the prints and collages from that Montana Miles series, and you can drill into that one for a very long time. See,
That was my farewell, except I did it in Milwaukee. The full sheet of zinc. And how I got,
I am going to just
Anaconda.
mention really quickly that you do have a disease called horror vacui. That's fear of empty spaces. It's very manifested in this.
Lots of my this is David Dreisbach, my mentor teacher at Northern DeKalb, gave me that title. He said, "You've got a terrible disease." It wasn't a compliment in his. Where is white space? White space is good. No, I like to fill up my space.
I saw the word Magda in there too.
Yes, these are all the arts organizations. I did a whole, and I saw everything through the windshield of the car. But in the side view mirror is always a smokestack. That's where I've come from. Mm-hmm. How many notice that? The smokestack is in every side view mirror. And then there's another one. I think I didn't have I did a second one, no, another same size, and I think the last print sold, or I don't have it. But there's a companion. This is the people, or is this the arts organization?
Yeah, just the organizations, and
there's one that has Dave Nelson's face in it. And that print isn't here, and I don't know who still has that print. But I think that like that little arch in the back, I think there's a whole big section, and it's his face. It's too bad we don't have that.
I know we were trying to give the plates to the Montana Arts Council, and I hope that happened. We'll see.
I still have that.
Yeah, but So it was kind of serendipitous. I got laid off from the Yellowstone Art Museum during COVID and had some time on my hands, and I was still in Montana. And Sister Joann was really concerned because she was losing her studio in the high school where she'd been working for many years, and she had a nice print studio, and she needed to clean it out and get all those prints and plates out of there and what to do. And so we started talking about touring her Montana work in Montana. And I was able to meet with Eileen Joeann and see all the prints that she had in Anaconda, photograph them, document them. And then I ended up moving back to Milwaukee, where I had lived for a while too, where I could live less expensively, and then was able to photograph her work there as well. And then we worked together to put this together. And thanks so much to the Missoula Art Museum for spearheading this and allowing it to tour, being the sponsor that allowed it to come into Magda.
Now, I want to embellish on her simple little rendition of how she got this going. Without her and without Eileen back there, we wouldn't have this exhibit. Eileen had the press and the plates. This was the genius of her mind figuring out things. The first thing I had to do was to get the plates to Anaconda so I could print them. And then the cost of getting them there when I went to a framer or to a shipping place and brought them just a small pile of metal. And he told me it would be $200 to ship just that. And I thought, oh my gosh, this can't be. And then Susan arrives. She's in Sheboygan, an hour drive away. And she hasn't even unpacked. And I get a call and says, I have a week to give you and get your plate. We're going to do this Anaconda because your stuff belongs in Montana. And I'm going to make it happen. And boy, did she make it happen. Here she comes. She said, get the plates out. So I had all the plates out. And she comes in with her professional camera, her professional lights. And we set up, and we're in the basement of Dominican High School. And I have all the stuff on a long table. And she finds the right spot, sets up. And all the plates, she chooses the 25 that are going to be part of the show. And shoots them and inventories them and puts together the beautiful PowerPoint thing of the whole.
Basically, the
And
checklist
everybody
for the
could
show.
get that
Yeah,
PowerPoint.
that's true.
You
Yeah,
could.
yeah. So that was helpful for
She'll
building
tell you
it.
how to do the
And
PowerPoint.
I am just remembering how the prints and plates got here too. It just came back. I told Joann, you need to just go to a thrift store and find a big junk suitcase. And then so we packed the suitcase to the maximum weight limit.
Yeah,
of course.
she said, Joann, bring your bathroom scale. So I got my bathroom scale. And I remember you put the suitcase on first, weigh that.
Yeah, and we weren't able to include that
No.
plate. That was just went over the top. And I think we actually had to trim the border of the print a little bit.
Yeah.
It was already kind of trimmed anyway, so it was all right.
So then Eileen's at the other end. And then we begin the printing in her studio. Eileen, would you stand up so people can look at you? And she brought her daughter and I like to call them my grandnieces.
But as I said before, Sister Joann has this gift of building community and making people want to help her, and it's always worked on me. It was a joy.
And when we got the suitcase and we have it filled, she said, I'm leaving 2 pounds, it's below 2 pounds, I think 70 pounds was limit. And so I'm going to take it to the airport. Now this doesn't have wheels on it, this suitcase. No, days before that. And so the flight was 7 o'clock, and Sheboygan is an hour away, which means she had to get up at 5, she had to get up probably at 4 we had to be there an hour ahead of time. And she said, I'm gonna take you to the airport, but I wanna make sure that goes out. So I remember parking the car and we went lugging,
We got
wheeling,
the
we got
suitcase
this
into-
on a wheel
Yeah.
thing.
And then
took it in.
Eileen had to deal with that on the other end,
And I mean,
but yeah, so we were able to get them here
yeah.
inexpensively.
And so it's a community effort. I just had the ideas and all of, without Susan and Eileen, we wouldn't be here
And really
today.
shout out to Brandon too.
And Brandon,
Renchies,
yes,
because
Brandon.
he just took this and organized crate building and
Oh, yes.
and framing, and I'm sure that John was part of some of this too. But
Yes.
anyway, it's so great that this
And
came
Brandon
together.
put together the tour, or that Magda did, but I mean, he spearheaded the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I just learned that he's on a sabbatical, or, yes, that's wonderful. Yes, Brandon was key to this whole show. And supportive, so nothing is done all on your own. And I've been fortunate throughout my life is that there are wonderful people all over the place.
Wow. I'm really happy this came together. It's a wonderful show, and I'm happy that your storeroom got cleared out.
Yes, and now, well, okay, this is a very early thing. MIA used the smelter, I have none of this. Come on, it pulls out. The cover to the magazine that year, and printed in copper.
And that triptych is in the
Yeah.
back corner. It shows the ladles of copper going
Yes.
through the smelter. I always thought it looked like a really elaborate way of buttering toast.
Yes, and these are called anodes, and they look like little dresses here. But with my relationship with the copper company, when I needed to print my big prints, I needed to have a water tray to put large sheets of paper in. And to go to a store, I'd probably pay $500 for a tray like that. I go to the door, I go to the hill, go through the gate and say, if I could talk to someone about, they have a fabrication department, don't they? Yes. These are my dimensions. Could you fabricate something like that for me? And they did it free of charge. So I got my big, I don't know who has that now, but, and I'm the only one that exists that has their own little copper anode. It weighs about 40 pounds. They made me a replica of an anode that you pick it up and it weighs a solid copper.
Wow.
Yeah, so that, and when I was telling, but when we would meet with these small communities, people would often say, nobody's interested or whatever. And I wrote an article in here about that talks about the 3 dinosaurs that dare to dream or whatever. I take each person, but there's an article in here describing, what do I call it? I don't even know what I call it. It's been so long ago. In the 70s. Dave and I were both here in the 70s, and any of you remember the 70s? It was the best time to be alive. I think there was an energy that if people had ideas, you could make them happen. Vatican II happened, and Hunthausen was in this diocese. Everything was alive and and it was energetic time to be alive, I think, in the 70s. And that's when most of the art centers in the state got started, during the 70s. And my article's Unicorns, Dragons, and Such. It's based on a trip to the cloisters in New York. And I was so taken with the dragons. And then these books For heaven's sakes. Celeste, is Celeste here? Oh, there you are, Celeste. Okay, I finally get to meet you. These are the books I was talking about. The independent contractor, Cheryl Hutchinson, did this for the Arts Council. It's it's telling about my trip through Montana. And it has a picture of the map. Where is the map? That was the map.
So it shows the Montana Miles journey
That's
that
right.
you took
That's right, it's there, it
when you were
shows.
working for the
And then there's a
Council.
description of what I said. I kept copious notes and everything, so she just put everything together.
That's cool.
And then the other thing, this was very early, a magazine, 1988, that's a long time ago. It was Northern Lights Mining, the Once and Future King, it was called, the covers off. But its front and back uses the smelter, and then there's a whole article on them in here. With the churches and houses. So this has to be taped together, but anyway, when I leave, I've got these for you here. Okay. And I was talking with Celeste, we've been talking a lot lately. She's, oh, you've got paper there. Oh my. And we're talking about these materials, and I'm about ready to move on to another part of my life of getting older and what to do with these. And a friend encouraged that you can't drag these around for the rest of your life. Montana, again, needs, I mean, they belong here someplace. Okay. And so Celeste is going to handle where is the best place to keep these.
Okay.
While the exhibit's open, maybe we could share them with the audience in our library.
Oh, sure, oh, that's good,
Yeah,
sure.
Right.
Does anybody have questions?
I just thought, she told me on the phone about, starting to talk about those reports that were made from her yellow note pages of notes from all the communities she went in. But you described like going into Chester.
Yes.
Could you
yes.
do that?
Yes,
Just
I'll just take one of them. And
Because
as
that
I
was
drove
part of the
in,
report, was the environment that the people lived in.
yes,
Right? And
and
landscape.
I remember especially in the Golden Triangle section, Chester, I think Chester's up there, isn't it? Yeah. And I happened to be there at the height of grain season, and as I came into town, there was just a gentle wind that was, just moving the grain, and it was pure gold, literally and figuratively. But I mean, there was just so much about the approach to a community. And I remember once going to a town and, I say I would like to visit schools or we could meet teachers or whatever you want. And the town was so small, the man said, stop at the gas station. Or no, there's a gas station that has a little food bar and coffee. And he also is the postmaster. And, but we'll let you, you can tell us, everybody will meet you at the gas station at their break time. And I said, oh, that's the first time I've ever done that. So there you had the principal of the school, you had the superintendent, you had the bus driver, you had the doctor, you had everybody. And their lunch hour came, and then in the middle of it all, the postman, the gas station guy said, oh, I have to leave now and deliver mail. I'll be back. But that's the flavor of the town, and I tried to capture that kind of thing. If I can see one of those in here. But it describes the process to a tilt. Well, I don't want to take too much time, but this does describe, but each time, and when I first did this, I didn't have a computer. And as Celeste knows, I'm a slow typer and I'm not a proofer, and so it's messy. So I need lots of help, and we've been a good pair together.
Yeah,
But I had a legal pad, a yellow legal pad, and I lined it up, the date, and then who I visited and who the key person was that my connection. And every place I visited was there. And then I wrote a report, handwritten report, to the Arts Council. And the first page was, as I drove I saw the sunset, or one time it was in Broadus, in the middle of the state, right down in the middle. There's one road in, that's it. And they were fixing it. And I drove up and I was on the top of a ended road. And I said, where do I go? I mean, how do I get where I'm going? And, but the space is so describing the landscape as you're coming in, and all of that is in the report. And Dave told me that when touring groups of theater and music wanted to go, they would say, can we read Joann's report? So they would read the report before they went to the town, and they felt like they'd already visited it because and they eventually got typed up, I think, but they're all handwritten little things. Because I think that's all part of what you feel about a community.
It's a great testament to Dave Nelson's vision.
Yes,
That
yes, it is a
You're a great
testament.
team.
Yeah. And then this one time, and in my talk tomorrow, I'm going to use it as an example. One of the common themes as I went through the towns was the desire for theater. People wanted theater. And there were theater groups they were getting to hear about, would like to bring in, but they didn't have the money. And then there was a fear. What if we have to pay, and if we don't sell enough tickets and people don't respond, they're not used to coming to theater, who's going to pay that bill? And I mentioned that to Dave, and he created a courage fund. Tell the people to say yes, and work their tails off selling tickets. And if you don't break even, call Mac.
Wow.
And as far as I knew, no one ever asked for the money. In fact, some group were so surprised, they paid all their bills, they had some excess money, and they gave some to the Arts Council and said, give this to some people that need courage. And that's exactly what it is.
The Arts Council also started, similar to Magda, a touring organization that tours theater.
Yes.
And books and tours in Montana called MPAC. So MPAC is almost as old as Magda.
And also Shakespeare in the Parks.
Yeah.
That was coming in the 70s too. And that, Anaconda had Shakespeare. I think they still have Shakespeare in the Park, don't they, Eileen?
Yeah.
And Dave and I were a good team. I would bring in information and he would, or the needs, what people are thinking about. And that's exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And then to figure out how we can help with that.
How long would you spend in each town?
It depends.
On the site? Yeah.
Sometimes it would be 1 day, sometimes 2 days, or sometimes 3 days. Once I stayed in a bunkhouse And it took me 2 hours to drive to the ranch. And then where was it? And then we had our evening meeting. So by the time we got back to the ranch from the evening meeting, it was,
Midnight.
yeah, midnight.
Yeah, midnight.
In dark,
Yeah,
dark, midnight. And another time, was it not in Broadus? We were way up near the Canada. That's not Broadus, I can't remember. But a woman was with me and we were coming back and it was midnight. And the northern lights.
Oh.
And we got out of the car and we sat on the roof. And it was like having a slideshow just for yourself. And dark, we don't experience dark anymore. And it was total darkness. And then this amazing northern lights was worth a lifetime to see those.
Sister Joann,
Yes.
did you tell everybody the name of that survey that you were doing? It was called the
Yes.
Small Community Arts Resources Survey.
Yes, that's right, that's what this is.
Yeah, I think that word small is even
Yes,
important. I
yes,
saw it
small.
somewhere else written without the
Mhm.
small, just community arts. But this
Would
was
you like to tell about the program?
specifically for the small
Yes,
community.
yes.
That's so cool.
Celeste, would you like to say something about, she's been working on this wonderful,
This little brochure about Dave.
yes.
Because Laura and six of us, including Laura, at the library here, have been meeting and celebrating Dave for months because we've been having some meetings to try to plan this event tomorrow, to plan it for tomorrow. And it was just such a miracle that it meshed right in with Sister Joann's already scheduled exhibit here.
We planned it that way.
Yeah, we were thinking about.
So smart.
That's like my planning, being in Montana and Milwaukee.
Beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have the program down at the front desk that you can check out. We'll put some of Joann's materials
Yes,
in the
they're-
library to share.
Yes, yes.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.